Hello, everybody. It's me, Pacific, sitting here at the Hong Kong Causeway Bay Harbor. Another beautiful day here. Today, I wanted to talk about Minnesota nice and manners in general. First, I want to give a disclaimer. The things that I'm about to say in this video do not apply to every Minnesotan and every person of the United States of America. If this does not pertain to you, please do not worry about a thing said. Hopefully, you're not offended. For those that this does apply to, take it to heart. Stretch your minds. Do some thinking. There are 300 million people in America, and there's pushing 7 billion people in the world. And not all think just like you. Time to stretch. That being said, I moved to Minnesota in 1989 from wonderful Arizona. I had a lust for winter. I saw a postcard picture of Lake Superior and I fell in love with it. So I moved to a city called Duluth, Minnesota, and I loved the place. Loved the old buildings, the San Francisco of the North sitting on the hillside, Lake Superior, winters, shipwreck history, shipping history. I was excited learning about Finland, Sweden, Norwegian culture. And I loved Minnesota. I really did. But upon moving there in 1989, I spent 5 years there, and I spent a couple years in Virginia, Minnesota, and Hibbing, Minnesota, what is called the Iron Range, and I will deal with that in a short time here. In Minnesota, I noticed something right away. The first thing to hit me is I was always a happy-go-lucky guy, and I'd be walking down the streets in Duluth, experiencing this new city. I'd moved there in April, so it was still coming out of winter. And here I am, not dressed for it, not ready for it. And somebody'd be walking towards me on the street. I'd smile, say hi, and they'd stare. It's like, whoa, that was weird. Walk into a store, say hello to a clerk, nothing. I heard the term for years when I lived up there, Minnesota nice. And I found that Minnesotans are very inverted, very, very antisocial, especially to outsiders. Now, let me give a disclaimer. They're social to their little group, but to outsiders and to some of us observers from the outside looking in, they seem to be socially retarded, especially in the Iron Range communities. In the Iron Range, I found people to be very, very closed. If you're not born and raised there, you're never really accepted. The unions are strong. Feminism has taken a good stronghold in Minnesota. A lot of the women lack manners, big time. Hold the door open for the average Minnesota woman or man, you don't get a thank you. I noticed that in Duluth. Not sure why. I had a friend for years that I really valued and liked, only to find out that he was not so Minnesota nice either. And I say that because I had my own insecurities, and as I was trying to grow in life, he seemed kind to me at the time, but always putting down everybody else from the rest of the other states. I kept hearing a common thing. It showed up in churches, in Minnesota, in Minnesota, in Minnesota. I noticed that when Minnesotans went anywhere else, and I did this too, because I was surrounded by that culture and it started to affect me. You go to another place, and especially further south in the natives of that area would say, boy, it's kind of chilly today. And the Minnesotan would go, ha, you don't know cold, you don't know winters. They kind of wear it on their sleeve. I found parts of Minnesota where people had never even been out of the town they lived in, let alone out of the state. And there was a prevailing mentality that only Minnesota was the only state that spoke right, did things right. I won't get into the politics, and I won't get into their belief systems, but what I found was a Minnesota cold. I drove a school bus up there for 5 years, and one of the things I noticed real quickly is Minnesota adults. I've watched something happen on a nationwide basis, but I really started to see it clearly in Minnesota. Every town and every city has its own unique fingerprint. I'm sitting here in Hong Kong. Nothing compares to Hong Kong. Nothing. Nothing compares to Duluth. Nothing. There are some things in America that are quite homogeneous, and there are other things that are unique and distinct. We're losing some of our individuality by big box retailers like Walmart coming in and everything becoming so corporatized that we all have to get on board the same Same bus, whether we like it or not. I don't care for that. Used to be neat when you went from one state to another and there was marked differences. And Minnesota had some marked differences. Unfortunately, I found some of those differences quite negative. Now, I've given the positive, and I could give many more. I made some good friends in Minnesota. Some of them that helped me and give me the shirt off their back. Met some old Finlanders that would tell me stories of their ancestors carving out a hard life in a hard place. Those stories are awesome. But I found the Scandinavian cultures to be somewhat icy. Found them to be stiff, not passionate, and not compassionate. I found the women to be very, very icy, very narcissistic, and especially the pretty ones, very inward, inverted, selfish. As a school bus driver, I noticed a lot of the parents were quite immature, and they're passing this baton of social retardation and lack of manners on to their kids. And I'm seeing this happen all across America, and I'm also seeing it happen in Australian culture, watching the Australians here. Just this morning, I watched a family of Australians walk right against the light when all the Chinese and everybody else was waiting, dragging their little young daughter in between them, teaching her it's okay to break the rules. And I don't know why that is. That's happening more and more. But in Minnesota, I noticed a cold rudeness. If they didn't know you, they didn't talk to you. To say hi to a stranger was just not acceptable. Now, I also noticed a difference in the southern part of Minnesota. I found people to be a lot more friendlier in the southern part of the state rather than the northern. But when I lived in the Iron Range, it was even more intense. I moved into a neighborhood. I was married at the time. I had inherited a house. And some people came up and said hi. They were curious. The house looked like hell, and we did a complete remodel, and some of the neighbors talked to us. But it didn't take me long to realize going into area businesses, you go up to the counter, and you go to spend your money in the place, and I had to buy a lot of building materials, and the people just ignore you and tell their dirty jokes to the staff and their typical Minnesota mentality, and you wait and wait, and you finally say, excuse me, and then they give you a crusty look and a crusty stare, and they're very unfriendly. Why? Because I'm not a ranger. I started going down to Duluth to some of the local stores to buy down there and said, I don't need this headache. And I quit. I quit supporting the local Iron Range economy. And then they started whining that a big lumber yard was going to come up to Duluth and how it would hurt their economy. And I wrote a letter to the editor, which started a firestorm, saying, good, the Iron Rangers need to be shook up out of their Minnesota rude. The Iron Range is socially retarded, make no mistake about it. The biggest sport up there is drinking and snowmobiling, and it's also become quite materialistic. I found the people on the Iron Range to be very unfriendly. After we had remodeled the house, there was a single woman behind us raising two boys. One of them went down the street and tore up a church. Both of them partied, did drugs, drinking, had girls over for sex, the whole 9 yards. None of my business, I understand that. But they were throwing their bottles in our yard, waking us up at all hours of the night, urinating in the alley, yelling and screaming, squealing tires in a tiny Minnesota town where you just don't do that. I finally went to address the problems in a letter to the lady because she had gotten sideways with my then wife when my wife went over to talk about a dog barking at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she was rude. The woman was unfriendly, and because she was friends with so many people in the neighborhood, all of a sudden they stopped talking to us. I didn't threaten her. I just said, could you get control of your kids? We are homeowners. We're not doing anything to you. And this is not just Minnesota. The basic mentality of most Americans today is, F you, buddy. Don't tell me what to do, and don't talk about my children. Parents and adults today are complaining about the way the youth are. Well, let's talk about that. Most adults, most middle-class families raise their kids in shopping malls, raise their kids in SUV speak, raise their kids in big houses, and they encourage the little princess narcissistic syndrome. And when it comes to fathers and sons, if you're not into pro sports, you must be gay. And if a boy's into ballet, dancing, or the arts, he's definitely a faggot. I don't know where all that came from, but stupid. Snowmobiling, to me, is not my thing. I think it's kind of cool. I've ridden a snowmobile, but it's not my thing. I could care less about football. They make too much money. But I notice in our culture, if you're not into football, you're not into beer, and you're not into the so-called man things, they look at you funny. Our American culture needs some healing, especially in the area of manners. And I notice that when you talk to most Americans, I get a response all the time. You're absolutely right in what you say. There's been a breakdown. It's rude, rude, rude. It was funny. I was working at a plasma center in Duluth, Minnesota, and there was a staunch feminist there. I really liked her, a very nice lady. But she would tell me that, she was putting men down and stuff. So one day I took my break, she took her break, went upstairs, go to the break room, and I flung the door open. And I didn't hit her or anything, but I flung it open, but I didn't hold it open for her, and I walked right through. She comes in after opening the door. She goes, "Excuse me, why didn't you hold the door open for me?" I said, "Hey, you want equal rights? Open it yourself." And she goes, "Wait a minute, wait a minute, ha ha ha." But she got it. I said, you can't have it both ways. More and more Americans are stopping their kindness because we're getting screwed. For example, you stop to help a motorist, the motorist steals your car and clubs you over the head. But, sad thing, Americans will stop for a pretty woman on the side of the road, but they won't stop for a male, by and large. Discriminatory? Racial? Biased? Chauvinistic? You bet. Men are driven by their penis, most of them. The sad thing is Minnesota manners left a lot to be lacking, and I'm not going to go on and on about it. I did not find Minnesota to be so nice. I love Minnesota forest. I love the back country, boundary waters. Lake Superior was awesome. I love the November gales. Something awesome about that inland sea, and I did meet some good people up there. But by and large, it was a cold-hearted, compassionless culture. I went to a church up there in Duluth, and a student that rode my bus one day drove his car and decided to run my stop sign on the school bus with students crossing. He knew where the stops were. He smiled as he went through when I honked the horn. I turned it into the police. Mommy calls me when I get back to the bus company. But you know us. We go to your church. Can't you drop the charge? I said, absolutely not, ma'am. He was smiling as he did it. When I honked the horn, he didn't make any attempt to put on the brakes, slow down, or stop, or nothing. And I said, and by the way, ma'am, you ought to see this kid daily. He's smart-mouthy, he is rude, and he is nasty. I drove a bus in Hibbing, Minnesota for a company, and I loved working for the company. And there was one route I had that was really good, but before I got that route, I had a route in an area of Hibbing that was out in the country. 99% of those kids, high schoolers and junior high, would not greet me, say good morning, thank you, nothing. Rude as rude can be. Yet daddy's got 2 snow machines and they're building their cabin and they got their house. Parents are passing the baton to the kids. The kids take and magnify that times 100 and they're getting worse. And what's parents' response? They don't care. Because they're going to die soon and they're just going to leave the mess for everybody else to deal with. But it's starting to take its toll. Kids are hitting their parents. Kids are cleaning out their parents. Kids are killing their parents. When are parents going to realize they have an obligation to be an example to their children? And the way you're acting, they're going to follow that and they're going to multiply it by 100%. A lot of kids today are no good. They're horrible. When a kid can say F you to an authority, that was unheard of when I was growing up. My grandpa would have knocked me in the next week, and so would have my father. You just don't say F you to an adult. They do today. Manners in general have gone by the wayside, and I've noticed that. I saw that in Minnesota, and I want to ask something. When I was on the Iron Range, there was a mentality that you weren't born and raised here. I thought we were part of the 50 United States. I thought that as United States, a person could pick up and move anywhere, and I could. I did. But then there's this level of non-acceptance, and it even went on in the church. I went to a church, a Baptist church in Chisholm, Minnesota. Cold as ice. I'd had trouble in my marriage. Nobody knew that, but we had made a decision to divorce. And all of a sudden, people come up to me. They weren't kind to me, didn't greet me. Every time I came to that church, it was cold as ice. And of course, the Jesus crowd come up, you shouldn't divorce, you shouldn't divorce. Whoa, hold it. Do you know what's going on in our marriage? Did you ever welcome us, ask, anything if you care, But even after the divorce, nobody reached out. Nobody was kind. I addressed the pastor in a letter about this. I said, the Iron Range needs to wake up. As Christians, we're not supposed to be the culture. We're supposed to be like Christ. He showed that to the elders. The elders laughed it off. It was well written. I showed it to some of my non-Minnesota friends, and they said, you're right on. Every place has a fingerprint, and too much culture has gotten a hold of all of us that when somebody attacks or critiques that culture, the anger starts to fly. I would say that parts of Minnesota are not well. If you were born and raised there, you don't even notice it. But for us outsiders coming in, it was interesting. I met a woman from Montreal. She was working at the Chisholm Mining Museum. I went through there with my son one day, and I thought she was a local gal. She just started talking to me. She opened up like a water faucet and said, are you from here? I said, no. She goes, yeah, I notice you're different. That's why she talked to me. She had married an Iron Range man. She said he was into drugs. She said he was cold as ice, and she was from Montreal. The woman was passionate, beautiful, expressive, very kind, and she was dying. She goes, you know, I can't handle this culture up here. The people are so cold and ice and rude. And I said, it is. I ended up leaving in 2008, and I don't regret it. I liked living up there, but the people makes or breaks a place. And if the people had been nice, I would have stayed. I actually liked the little town of Hibbing. It just had a nice little setting to it. Quiet, quaint town. But when the people are no good, doesn't matter how cutesy it is, it's time to go. The manners in general are disappearing. I see it on the bus, I see it out in public, I see it on the road. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why American men get in their SUVs, and women are doing this more and more. They bully people. I'm in something big, get out of my way, even if we're going the speed limit. And I say that about crosswalks. I see the Australians doing it here, and I see Americans doing it. I don't know what it is. White people think that the rules don't apply to them. They'll walk against the walk sign, and then when somebody honks, they flip them off. A motorist in America will cut me off and do something not just accidental, but intentionally rude. I'll honk. They'll slam on the brakes, and they're ready to fight. I don't know what has happened to Americans that they can't be corrected. You know, I heard a woman in the chat room say, you get what you project. And she can't understand why people don't like her, because she's projecting yuck. I try to project kindness. I try to project real. People that know me know that I'm friendly and know that I'm down to earth. I'm a little sarcastic because life has done that to me. One of the things that disturbs me is that people won't take and check themselves. And when you do point this stuff out to the people doing it, they just get angry and they're ready to fight. One day, I went to walk on a crosswalk. I pushed the walk button. The sign was not working. I waited an entire couple of traffic signals. I finally waited for the traffic going the way it's supposed to turn green. I start to walk out slowly. A guy in an orange safety vest, a traffic type worker in his pickup, turns the corner, waits for me, and then when I get right there, he decides to cut me off within 2 inches, and I yelled, "Hey!" He slams on the brake, gets out of the truck, and wants to throw punches. I pointed to the gas station. I said, I know those people over there, and they're watching you. You hit me. We got witnesses. The walk sign doesn't work, and why would you try to run somebody over anyway? I have watched people in the U.S. speed up when somebody's at a crosswalk. I've seen it. And these same morons will have their little poochy dog on their lap while they're driving. You pull the ears of their dog, they're ready to arrest you for animal abuse, but it's okay to almost run somebody down in a crosswalk with their Starbucks coffee and their SUV. I'm going to continue attacking this, and I hope it gets the attention of every American, and I hope it angers you enough to watch it and to comment, because at least it'll get you thinking. This stuff is wrong. People need to be valued, not your poochie, not your Starbucks, and not your stuff. And I looked in Minnesota, and I saw the kids as retarded. You say hello, you talk to them, nothing comes out. Well, that's starting to happen all over, but Minnesota was doing that first. And I did notice that in the northern cultures, there's a lot of drinking and a lot of rudeness and coldness. And I don't know if it comes from winters or whatever. When I get back to the U.S., I think I'm heading south for a change. I've spent enough time in the north. It's time to get out of Dodge. Kind of tired of the ice and sliding on roads and all that anyway. But it's not that hard to say hi. I would look at women in Minnesota, even in Spokane, other place I've lived. You smile at them, you get a glare. I don't know why that is. I don't know if women think that every man wants to get down their pants. They need to stop thinking so highly of themselves. You're not all that. There are some of us out there that are just being genuinely kind because that's the way I was always made. And that seems to be disappearing. Or if you're nice, you're called gay. We live in interesting times. And when somebody holds a door open for you, you need to have the courtesy to say thank you. And you also, when somebody's right behind you, need to hold it. There are times when I've held the door open and somebody will rudely walk through and I'll say, "You're welcome." Then they turn around and glare. They know what they're doing. And then when you call them out, boy, do they get pissed. It's interesting. Americans are contradictions and hypocrites all in one. If I let a door slam on a woman, she's going to give me garbage. But if I held it open for her, she's not even going to say thank you. I'm not sure what Americans want. If I tailgate somebody in their SUV and I haul around them and give them the dirty look, they're very angry. But if they do it to me, it's okay when I'm going the speed limit. The old saying, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you," is true. But for Americans, it doesn't apply to them. I love gangbangers. They can diss and trash everybody, steal stuff, use profanity, play their music loud. But if you diss them, you're going to get a bullet to the head. What's up with that, gangbangers? What's your problem? And I find that this culture is prevalent. We live in a Lady Gaga culture. Now, don't get me wrong, I like music. I've even listened to Poker Face and danced to it, and Bad Romance. But our culture is turning into sleaze. It's turning into trash. It's turning crass with no class. I'm not a rapper, but that might be the next one I'll write. I don't understand why. I know the Bible talks about this stuff, but I still don't understand why it's so hard to be kind. The other thing I've noticed in Minnesota is here I'm driving a school bus. You get into a construction zone, but this is happening everywhere too. The right lane ends, and it's ended, and the cones are starting to come diagonal towards my lane. Always a butthead has got to get in that lane, pass everybody, and decides, I don't want to be behind that bus, and he's going to drive in that lane and force his way over, cutting me off. You honk, you get flipped off. I don't understand that. If I were to do that to that guy, he would be so angry. I don't know why it's okay for Americans to be rude, but when people are rude back to them, they're ready to fight and demand their rights. You know, it's funny. I see this globally. The other day I was on a ferry. Two large Australian people, very fat, barged through. I was turning around to move and they just cut right by me. And I was standing on the ferry to get off, and I stood in my place. They were right up against me. The drawbridge went down. I went to get off. I didn't touch them, bump them, or anything, and I squiggled right out. Didn't break their stride, and the one woman yells, "He cut me off." Yeah, lady, did you know you just banged your fat butt into me on the way back there and didn't even say excuse me? And I didn't even cut her off. I don't know what's wrong with people. I'm still trying to scratch my head and figure it out. But you're teaching your children that, and you're passing it on. No wonder our education's falling apart. No wonder our morals are totally in the toilet. No wonder girls are becoming lesbian and boys are becoming gay. And we got adults swinging with other married couples and everything's going on. The Bible warned about this. And people in America laugh at faith. They laugh at the Bible. And I've attacked modern Christianity. We got problems. But the Bible's true. That I know. Jesus Christ is perfect. I'm not. I'm still working on it. I've got a long way to go. But the reason I make these videos is to stimulate thought. And if you get angry, good. I've accomplished my purpose. If you're angry, it means that what I'm saying is getting to you. I'm not here to make little cutesy stuff about how to pamper your pet. That's another thing. Here in Hong Kong, they got doggy funeral homes complete with caskets. And the ad says, "We know your pet is special to you. It's like a loved one. And you can come here to grieve, and we're very sensitive to that." And a funeral home for dogs and cats. It's funny, in Romans chapter 1 in the Bible it says they will worship the creation rather than the creator. We are definitely seeing that in our gotta have my SUV and my latte mentality and my little Poochie too. And I got a message to dog owners, you don't have manners either. You let your dog poop and pee all over the place. In Hong Kong here, you do that, the police ticket you on the spot. And they give you the riot act. You got to carry a water bottle, squirt it down on the pee, and you got to pick up that poop and put it in a bag and throw it out. You get caught doing that, you're done. It's a big fine. I'm glad. I wish the U.S. would do the same. I've watched neighbors let their dog walk into my yard and poop while I'm looking out the window, and they pretend that they don't see me. Nice. I wonder what they'd think if I pulled my pants down and pooped in their front yard. They'd call the police on me. Be fun to do it just to see what happens. You know, dog owners are interesting too. When I lived in Colorado and in Minnesota, we had a plethora of dog owners that are gone all day and late into the night, and they leave the dog to yap, 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 yap all night. They think their doggy's cute, but the rest of us don't, and we got to hear it. 10 neighbors are affected by one, and the 10 go to that neighbor. Well, it's a dog. Dogs bark. And no duh. Get it debarked, put it to sleep, or shut it up and bring it in the house. I'm amazed at the lack of care for our fellow man. I am amazed at the mentality of gimme, 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 take, 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 and the mentality of most middle-class Americans and Democrats and Republicans, I've got mine, screw you. My uncle's right when he said that. Too many people are like that. I got mine, screw you. Too bad, you're floundering. We don't care anymore, and our manners are gone. There are some people that still use manners, but by and large, it's disappeared. You go to the average checkout of the store where there's the young teeny bopper girl working there. She's rude. She doesn't even say, hi, how are you? But her friend comes over, oh, and she's talking away. Customer service with a smile. And that's another thing that bothers me. From Spokane to Minnesota to all across our nation, I see people in jobs with 450,000 people a week losing theirs, and these people have an attitude. They're rude to the customer, they're unprofessional, they're unkind. How did they get the job? They must have known somebody. In northern Minnesota, you're not going to get a good job unless you are born and raised there or know somebody, and that really applies to the mining industry. It is nepotistic to the core. And one of the things about the Iron Range I noticed is it's very provincial. And I hated that. I feel very uncomfortable with that. America's a nation of melting pot. And this mentality, you get into small towns and a group of white people live there for a while, and Hawaii's guilty of this one. An outsider comes in and they exclude, and they're very rude and unkind to them. Unless they happen to adopt them in their clique because of money or social standing or whatever. Hawaii's horrible. Mainlander moves to Hawaii, the Hawaiians got the mentality that you're no good. And the good jobs will go to the local Hawaiians. You know, America consists of people coming from everywhere. Northern Minnesota came from Scandinavia, but they forget that. And then when somebody else decides, hey, I'd like to live in that small town too because I'm tired of the crime of the big city, then everybody gets mad. Why is everybody moving here? What, are you guys the only ones that have that right? I always called Minnesota the People's Republic. It really is. The Democrat thinking up there is so entrenched that it's unbelievable. Support only big unions, and they whine when they don't make more than $25 an hour, and when the unions can't afford to pay the people, they get up and leave. That's why mining's taking a big hit. The overseas market is killing them. And, you know, it's interesting. Until people wake up, until they start using manners, until we start caring about people, we can yell and scream about the economy all we want. Our politics has got to get a grip. But we're only going to rise as the people are. And when we allow bad manners, bad ethics, and a love of money and a love of pets more than a love of fellow man, this is what we're going to get. American culture is on the decline. It's getting worse. People around the globe want to emulate our culture, and I'm finding myself finally saying, please don't. You got a good culture. And there are cultures that are starting to say, we don't want Hollywood in our backyard. Hollywood is contributing nothing to the good of humanity. We've got people that are addicted and obsessed with what's on the next sitcom. Hollywood has dominated us so much that, like I said in one of my earlier videos, Christians got to race out and see the latest movie, and they know more about the latest movie and shows than they do about their own Bible. And there's the secular culture as well. We've had the envelope pushed so much that we don't have a sensitive conscience anymore. It's okay to be gay, it's okay to be sexual, it's okay to do, and I've done it. I've been very promiscuous because I grew up in that. I've failed at several marriages. And why? Because of my own sin, but because of the culture I was brought up into. And no, I'm not blaming the culture. I take accountability for my wrongs. My parents handed me a bad batch of stuff. And the kids are only going to be as good as the parents, or as bad as the parents. And one thing I've noticed is if you don't spend time teaching your children what is right and wrong, not just what irritates you, but how to respect the fellow man. I remember one day somebody came up and said hello to my son and I told my son, when he ignored the person talking to him, I said, you look that person in the eye and you smile and you say, good morning. I see the kids getting worse in our country. I see it on the school bus. They don't greet me. They think I owe it to them. I don't owe it to them. That's my job. And, you know, even here in Hong Kong, I get off and say, Ngoy Sai, Ngoy Sai, which is thank you, to the tram operator, and they're responding to that. I say thank you to the bus driver. They're serving me. They're serving us, and they're doing their job. It's not that hard to do. When somebody holds a door open for you, you may be a rabid feminist, but try to think. They don't know that. They're just trying to be kind. Not everybody's trying to get down your shorts, lady. I don't know where you get that idea. Not all of us are all about sex all the time. But parents, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, especially in northern Minnesota where you teach them that value means snowmobiling and a cabin and 30 pointers and a beer can. What in the world are you handing to your kids? We've got this mentality that we're just going to, what's that song? It's my life. Like Frankie said, I want to do it my way. When you have a nation of 300 million individuals where they're all touting that, sooner or later it's going to bite you in the butt. We're already seeing it with gang cultures. We're already seeing it with the African American culture slamming their weight around with the rap music and offending neighborhoods and culture so much that upstanding citizens just get out and leave. And I'm going to do a video on African Americans in the U.S. because I've got a lot to say. I'm not racist. I have some friends that are black people, and black is beautiful. I know some beautiful black ladies. But African culture in the United States, by and large, needs a spanking. I know that there was slavery and racism, and that was wrong, and I've always condemned it. I wasn't part of that problem. I was born after all that stuff had got well underway. I'm Irish. I'm adopted. I went through my own form of prejudice and discrimination. I'm young looking. I'm not a professional. I'm discriminated against by my own white people on a daily basis. I don't earn this much. I drive a school bus, blah, blah, blah. It goes on all levels. And no, I don't just get a job because I'm white. That's not true. But this isn't about black culture. I will say that a lot of black culture is very offensive and rude. And a lot of American culture is offensive and rude. And a lot of Southern culture is offensive and rude. And a lot of Northern culture. And a lot of California culture. And a lot of East Coast. And Midwest. We were supposed to be the United States. We were supposed to have basic values of civility and kindness and accepting each other, even if we are different. The only level of acceptance that goes on is everybody's so selfish. It's like, well, as long as you're not bumping into me, I don't really care. I like what a friend of mine said. What happened in the 1970s when blacks and whites were dancing to the same music together? Isn't that the truth? We were all listening to the Bee Gees and doing disco and wearing bell-bottom pants. It looks ridiculous now, but it seems that racism's gotten more intense over the years. Now we got the dynamic of the Hispanics versus the whites. The Hispanics are moving into the southern parts of the United States and up into Colorado in the shiploads. White America is going to have to wake up. One of the things that opened my eyes is coming over here to China. 1 billion people. I'd like to see the people on the Iron Range dare to show up in a place like Hong Kong and pull their little attitude here. It wouldn't get far. This place would chew them up and spit them out. We are in the minority. We're only 300 million Americans. And as far as white people go, the numbers are against all of us. America's not going to be white forever. It's not going to be provincial in northern Minnesota forever. The economy's not going to support high heating bills and fuel bills to maintain people living in an area of the country that really should probably just shut down because it's too expensive to maintain a home up there. I wish that we were like the good old days where we pooled together. Oh, the cliques pool together. But we're not going to reach outside the clique. I've noticed also in the winter, be it Minnesota or Denver, Colorado, when there's slush on the roads, people love to get in their cars and hit that stuff and splatter people at bus stops and pedestrians. I would love so much to wait for them to park their car, gun my truck, right when they open their door and go, boosh! They wouldn't like it. But it's funny when they're doing it. I'm not going to say the old saying, what goes around comes around, but what I can say is it might get you one day, and in the end, God will judge all of us for all this foolishness. Manners isn't that hard. Being quiet and civil in an apartment building with other neighbors close to you is in order. I noticed that most of the time living in apartments, I lived in Hibbing, there was an 18-year-old couple, both of them quit their jobs, they had a 3-year-old girl. They were up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, banging and screaming and yelling the F word at each other, the toddler running up and down the stairs, screaming and yelling. I went to the door, did the good neighborly thing, and said, hey, please, I can't sleep. Oh, we're sorry. Okay, that's cool. Next night, they did it again. Knocked on the door. Now they're rude. Third time, I'm getting sick of you coming over here complaining about us. It's deafening on my side of the wall. Called the landlord. Said, come into my house and listen to this. Oh, I don't need to do that. I'll just go talk to them. Nothing happened. I kept begging him, just come into my place and listen to this. It was deafening. I had my friends over. My son came over. And my friend, who's a hardened truck driving woman, biker chick, said, what the hell is their problem over there? That is ridiculous. She wanted to go over there and punch them both. Our society is developing more callousness because we're banging into each other and we're not being polite, and that hardens us. And the harder we get, the more callous we get, the more heartless we become. This stuff is serious. It starts with mom and dad. It starts with teaching your children, when you're rude, I'm not going to put up with it and I will discipline you for it. Spankings need to be brought back. And I'm sorry for you anti-spanking people. Your kids are little brats because of that. Don't tell me you never had to spank your child, and I'll show you a spoiled, rotten, very unkind person. I remember growing up in California. Yes, California public schools. 1970s. If I fooled around on the bus driver could stop that bus, grab me by right here, pick me up and slam me against the side of the seat compartment and say, Mr. Nelson, are you going to continue to do this? Or do I have to hurt you? No. It worked. I don't call for violence and I don't call for abuse. But our culture's getting bogged down in every little crazy, aberrant belief and ideology and minority special interest, tree-hugging, spotted owl, save your whale but kill human babies group. Talk about manners. It's okay to promote abortion, but we got to go save the whale. And Greenpeace is out there ramming Japanese fishing boats that have a legal right to do it. Unbelievable. It's okay for hoodlums in the U.S. to protest and graffiti and defecate and urinate and set fire to things. Really? That's somebody's property, bonehead. A guy in Denver, Colorado was in his business late one night and heard a noise out in the back alley, opened the door, and a kid is graffitiing the entire back wall of his business. He grabbed the punk, grabbed the spray can, and squirted him in the face. I applauded it. I'm like, yeah! Vigilante justice is going to happen. I don't endorse it, but even our police departments, if I react to what somebody has done, I'm in trouble. But the perp who did it gets away with it. You call in and complain about somebody's idiot behavior with their barking dog for 6 months before they get a fine. No wonder neighbors are poisoning dogs. I heard of some guy doing it in Denver, and the outcry went out. He was jailed in court and on and on. Nothing was done to the neighbors, who everybody couldn't get to sleep because of their two barking giant toy poodles. America is drowning in lunacy, stupidity, where the criminal goes free, where the pedophiles go free, where pornography is encouraged, where drinking is encouraged and even approved of and applauded by an increasingly antisocial culture. Socialization now means Facebook texting. I know kids on my bus that will text each other on the bus. Stupid. We have become very antisocial. The whole materialistic philosophy is antisocial. I got my little toys. I'm going to go run off and play. Leave me alone. We don't share anymore. I liked it when America, I want to say something to you people so that you don't think I'm anti-American. I went into a karaoke bar the last few months here. And one of my favorite songs is Arlo Guthrie's City of New Orleans. And I sing that with pride. I'm a sentimentalist, and I'm a romantic. That symbolized a railroad culture that was strong, where people used to get on a train to go somewhere. That's gone. That song is good. The lyrics are powerful. Now all we can produce is garbage. I love the mighty Mississippi River rolling down to the sea. I love the stories of the old Southerners when the Mississippi flooded and they helped each other. I love the stories of people catching catfish and living in a floating houseboat home. I love the stories of New Orleans and the Old West and the mining days and the Redwood Forest and New York when it was first settled. I love America. I don't like what's happened to it. I am sad. I don't want to come home. I come home in March. I would rather live in a foreign country and get a job than return. America is not nice anymore. I go into a chat room. There are some nice folks. It's a Christian chat room. The meanness among the so-called saints in there is unbelievable. The lack of care for fellow man is unbelievable. I have found myself becoming increasingly calloused and fighting back. The reason I make these videos is hopefully the numbers will show up and people will say, you got to see this. Whether you agree with it or not, if I can get you to watch it, I've succeeded. America is not a great country anymore. That word has been redefined. We used to be great because we had a lot of good things. But when you lose civility and dignity and decency towards fellow humans, from city to town, state to state, an American to an American, it's pretty sad. I don't care if General Motors goes belly up. I don't care. I don't care if our economy crumbles to the ground. I think that'd be the best thing that happened to us. When the stock market crashed in 1929, little boys got tough. We didn't have a bunch of little princess, bitchy girls, teenagers, texting each other, smarting off to mom and dad, being rude to their public servants, school teachers, bus drivers, principals, cops. We didn't have little boys masturbating in the closet all day to porn and dressing up like little girls to fulfill some fetish. We didn't have little boys sitting there drowning in video games and antisocial behavior. You go to a baseball game now and some people don't even shut up to do the national anthem or take their hat off anymore. People forgot how to put their hand over their chest. Pro sports dominates, Hollywood dominates, materialism dominates, and a culture of sleaze has taken over. Jerry Springer TV has become reality in this country. So much drama. We used to say trailer trash, referring to people that just were morally filthy. Now it's becoming the norm. People that live in $400,000 or $500,000 homes are trailer trash now. I don't know what the answer is to this, but I look back to the 20s when the stock market fell. I look back when we got into the war. People came together back then. It's going to take a crisis before America improves for the better. It's going to take a crisis for people to care about each other. The more materialistic we become, the more alienating we are becoming. The more we're tuning out from people and tuning into doggies and Hollywood and the internet and all this other stuff. And Christians are no exception. They go to more seminars and more crusades and more Bible conferences. They're not changing either. They're becoming just as secular as the world around them. I love my country, but I don't like what's happened to it. I wish I could go back to the time when a family of 6 lived in a small house and loved each other, and mom tucked the children in bed, and the father came in after a hard day's work, and they said the blessing at the meal. I don't even pray over my meal like I used to. We're a thankless generation of people. We don't have manners towards what God has given us, and we hoard it upon ourselves, and then we give a teeny bit to some tsunami relief in Japan and think we've done our part. While Americans are gluttons, stuffing their houses, stuffing their bellies with beer and drugs and cigarettes and porn and everything else. And we don't even give a damn about our fellow neighbor. This does not apply to everybody, but it applies to most people today. Living in suburban America is a joke. Get in your Tahoe or your Suburban, push the remote control, door goes up, car goes in, door shuts. Don't talk to me. You can live in your home now. You can do anything in your home on the internet because nobody sees you. I long for the day when America has a thunderclap of judgment hit it. And when I say judgment, something to shake it up enough to bring us all together to truly unite, to care. Maybe if a big country went to war against us, just wanting to annihilate us, we'll wake up out of our stupidity. I'm sorry, but Good Morning America and all those little shows, garbage. People stand in line for hours just to get their face shown on New York television. How vain we are. I have no interest in Diane Sawyer and Barbara Walters and all these jokesters on TV making too much money with their spin doctoring and their liberal agendas. I'm tired of American television dominating America, and we don't even get other nationalities' television on there. You do in Hong Kong. You can get Italian TV, German TV, BBC, you can get it all here. American cable is almost $100 a month. It is $100 a month in some towns, and all we're getting is garbage. And now people defend it. Well, I can learn a lot from the History Channel. How about if you learn a lot by getting involved with life and people? I got an inheritance, so I came to Hong Kong. I don't own a house. I have a $3,000 pickup. I'm not a materialist. All that I own fits in the bed of my truck now, and that's what I intend to keep. That's it. And I would get rid of all of that to live in a foreign country. I love Hong Kong. It's materialistic too, don't get me wrong. But I'm forced to deal with people from all over the globe here, and I'm loving it. I don't just sit here and make videos all day. I'll go to the library and I'll get back out in the flow. I talk to people from all over the world. And do you know what they're saying? What is happening to your country? Why aren't they waking up? Why is their economy going? Why are they producing garbage? We're #1 in porn production. Isn't that great? Wave your little flag, Americans. Isn't that fun? We're drowning in beer, drowning in porn, drowning in drugs, drowning in materialism. When we should be tightening our belts and being fiscally conservative, northern Minnesota buys a new vehicle every 2 years. It's ridiculous. I remember the days when people kept a vehicle for 20 years and wore it into the ground before buying a new one. I can't afford to buy new. I buy used. Nobody's going to key my truck. Nobody's going to feel inclined to steal it. That's another thing. Your stuff isn't even safe anymore. I remember hearing stories in towns and places in the U.S. you could leave your doors open. Locks are truly for honest people. If the thug wants to get in, he can smash anything down. Yeah, we lack manners. Is Minnesota nice? Depends on who you talk to. My experiences with the people by and large, it's a pretty cold place. And as I watched the manners slide around the nation, I saw in Minnesota social retardation long before it was happening in other places. I heard a lot of jokes about me being from California and out west, but I remember even in California people being friendly when I was growing up. Moved to Minnesota and they're putting down California, but they're watching the same stuff that's produced out of there, Hollywood. And their manners were ruder than ours. I know California's way out there, they've pushed the envelope, but the point that I'm trying to make is there's mentalities that are wrong. We need to have manners, we need to care about our fellow man. That's all I have to say on it. This is Pacific signing off. Try to show a little kindness. And as Dennis Anderson in Duluth used to sign off the news broadcast every night, good night, everybody, and be kind.